I want to ask you a question because you have been working with people in your clinical practice. You've been conducting a tremendous number of clinical trials. And so you see it both in your one-on-one patient interactions from the ages of like literally 5 to 90. And then you also see it as you're measuring data points. Is it your opinion as a researcher and as a clinician that there has been a large increase in this feeling of emptiness and this feeling of blah, that anhedonia, that you are seeing in the wake of the last 3 to 4 years of the collective trauma of going through the pandemic and all of the just injustice that played out in the news in terms of police brutality and in the political turmoil, that is a collective trauma that has caused a spike in anhedonia, this lack of joy in people?
Absolutely. I think that people are not processing the trauma. They're just told to go, go, go. And if you think about it, the pandemic had such uncertainty financially. A lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, they didn't want to lose their jobs, their businesses, their babies, right? Businesses are their babies. So what do? Well, we gotta keep working. We gotta keep working. Many entrepreneurs are still in fight or flight mode from the pandemic. The same for corporations, right? People didn't know if they were going to keep their jobs. So what do? Work came home. It was supposed to only stay home for a little bit. Work is in the home indefinitely now.
Right.
So like our boundaries are totally skewed. We're working more than ever. Children, the same thing. A lot of them can't catch up because of the delays that happen in the education system. Teachers are doing their best, but children are feeling this pressure to like catch up, right? We all can't catch our breath. The trauma ocean is just hitting us wave after wave. And if we don't sit still, if we don't process the trauma, if we continue using these other things to soothe in excess, we're not going to be able to recover. We have to take the time to feel.
I want to make sure that you listening, that you're hearing what Dr. Judith is saying, because I think she is 1,000% correct. And I'm so glad you're the one saying it, because you have the credentials and you have the research and you have the awards and all of it to basically say, listen up. The reason why you feel empty and numb and burnt out is because you are struggling with this condition that was created by 3 to 4 years of sustained uncertainty, the likes of which a human being is not designed to process. You know, I'll just share a little bit, because when you and I last met, it was when I was hosting a daytime talk show. And it was just after one of your last appearances that COVID-19 was found at CBS Broadcast Center. They evacuated the building. They summarily canceled my show. I have a payroll to make. The kids come home, and I have conveniently pushed that to the back of my mind, that period of time where I was in sheer panic about how I was going to pay the bills, what was going to happen, how I was going to keep healthcare going for people, what was going to happen to my kids. And every single one of us has that story. And so I agree with you. I also agree, and I think it's very important for you listening to hear that if you worked for somebody, there was a anxiety response to what was happening. And there was a time where your work life was okay and manageable, and then all of a sudden you found yourself on a never-ending Zoom parade where you were constantly online, the kids were at your feet. And I think it's important, and it's great that you're talking about it, because our instinct in life is to basically pull up our big girl pants and move on. Like, we got through that. We're not talking about it. I hate that term, the new normal, because it basically means, and what you're saying and what you're seeing from a research perspective and a clinical perspective, is that this has impacted your ability to access joy. This is why you feel that you're just, or you're empty. And that's why you're having trouble sleeping. That's why you just kind of want to get on with it. That's why nothing quite feels right, because it hasn't gone back to normal because you haven't reset your body back to normal. And are you also saying, though, that there's something we can do and that we should do and that it will help both process all of the crazy stuff that we all just survived and that we're not talking about because we want to forget about it, and that it will help us access joy and happiness again?
I'm so grateful you said that so beautifully. I mean, you're so in tune and so connected to your listeners. What you just did was validated them. You named what they were going through, right? We called it affect labeling, naming how you feel. Because when you know what it is,
right,
you're less afraid.
That's true.
As humans, we need to know what it is. You validated everyone and said, this is what you're feeling. The other thing that you did so beautifully was you said, I was in a haze. I don't remember. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from my patients. 2020 was a blur. Even my lab team, we're like, what were we doing in 2020? Sometimes we go through like the phone and we look at pictures. We were on the roof drinking tequila. Like,
that's what researchers do after a big study.
We needed something, a little something. But like, yeah, it's like we don't remember things, right? Like that's a symptom of trauma.
Yeah.
Right? People forget huge parts of their lives. So don't be surprised. Don't knock yourself if you don't even remember parts of 2020. That's a trauma response, right? People were also awarded. They were rewarded and awarded for pushing through. So
how
again,
so?
So your corporate anhedonia is contagious. It is contagious. So like if you ever heard the saying, the fish rots at the head?
No, but that's disgusting. And
maybe it's a snake. But there's a saying.
I believe you. I believe you.
Well, if a corporation is anxious, like you said.
Yes, top
and the
down.
boss is anxious. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose everything. Well, that gets passed down, right? It's trickle down. Everyone else is anxious. Everyone's working. And if the heads have not relaxed, if they haven't stopped that, or if they've gotten wise and they're like, we're making money, let's keep this fair going, it's never going to stop. In fact, you get rewarded with the more work and the less you feel.
Yes. And I think this has snuck up on people. And so I want to tell you, as you're listening to Dr. Judith, she's not joking that this crept up on you. And if you feel like you can't get back to yourself, if you feel like you can never catch a break from work, even when you're not working, you're thinking about it. You can't find that off switch so that you can drop into those points of joy that you don't even probably remember because that was 4 years ago and you've been running 100 miles an hour since. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing, both as a psychiatrist and a researcher.
Here's the thing, doctors and healthcare providers, they don't code something unless it causes impairment. So if you go into the doctor and you're like, I just feel kind of blah and they're going to be like, well, are you working? Yes. Are you taking care of your family at home? Yes. Is anyone really complaining? No. Okay, well, I'll see you next year, right? It's like not like digging deeper, like something's off. Like I just feel like any minute now something's going to happen. I can't put my finger on it. Or I feel like, nothing gives me pleasure. If you go to a doctor with that, they're going to be like, oh, well, I don't, your function's okay. You're good.
I think I just got what your research is about. So you've identified the symptom and how it appears on the surface, which any one of us that are just going through life would describe as I feel blah, I feel empty, I feel a little lost, I feel like I'm on autopilot. You have grabbed onto this thing that we may describe casually to somebody, but it is a low ache inside of your soul, basically.
Yes.
Where you aren't feeling a lot, you're kind of in survival mode, and yet you're still getting it done. And you've pulled on that thread in people who are functioning and pushing through and getting it done, and you have found a very deep connection that on the surface, when you say to yourself, which I think if you're honest with yourself, everybody is suffering from a level of this. Yeah. Unless you have truly taken your mental health and your nervous system and processing what we all just went through, you are probably feeling this. And you have pulled on that thread and gone all the way down to say, holy smokes, this is somebody who's turned off feelings. And this is somebody who has blocked their access to joy and happiness, and more chasing and trying to get the Lamborghini or more Instagram followers or to lose weight or to find a person to date. All that shit on the outside is never going to impact this. And that's why you say you have to, especially right now, you have to throw the definition of what happiness is out the damn window. Because I think we are all, when you say happiness, what that means to me is, like, most of us are chasing it, right? We think more money will create that feeling. We think losing the weight will create that feeling. And I'd love to just go and start talking about terms, because we all want what you're talking about. We all want to get rid of the emptiness. I want everybody listening to feel validated, like this really happened. It really impacted you, and it's still impacting you. Mm-hmm. And you know it, but people are not talking about it. And this is a deep, well-researched, psychologically validated, I don't even know if that's a term, but it is real. And so if we're going to throw happiness as we think about it, and how do most people that walk into your practice, how do most people think about happiness in the wrong way?
So I've developed this anhedonia rating scale. Anyone can take it. It's on my website.
You are such a scientist. I love this. There is a scale for this.
There's points, right?
Yes.
You can't tell people to measure it and then they have no way. So if you fill out the rating scale, you'll see that it's made up of points of joy. Now, there have been anhedonia rating scales for decades.
Okay.
I modified them because the older ones, like the SHAPS, the Snaith Hamilton rating scale.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but okay.
Well, it has a British twang to it. So we'll say, did you enjoy your cup of tea this morning? That's my British accent.
It's a good one.
Did you like that landscape? Well, we don't have that, right? I don't drink tea in the morning. So I had to modify and add things that, relate to today.
Okay.
One of the things I found is that people with anhedonia will say, I will be happy when, or if this happens, then I'll finally be happy. So there's this picture of what happiness looks like. And it's usually when something happens.
Yes.
They're missing the mark, because even research shows that even when you get that picture, when that thing happens, you're still not happy. So then it's another goal. It's another thing. Being happier in the day is what matters. One thing we all have in common is that tomorrow is not promised, right? We all have that in common. So how do we increase the points of joy today?
You're about to hear one of the most validating, important, and impactful interviews I've ever done on this podcast, period.